Good morning. I am, along with some other folks who are recording and watching in the sanctuary of Bethlehem, Stonepile United Methodist Church. Comparatively speaking, it's kind of lonely here compared to what we usually have. Like many churches across the country, state, nation, we are not holding larger gatherings. But we still want to remember that we are God's children. And for us to remember that is important. So I am here to remind you, especially the people who usually worship at Bethlehem, Stonepile, or Springvale churches, what we would be doing if we were together today. We always begin our services with announcements. Don't have many to make today, other than the fact that we will not be meeting in any fashion for the next couple of weeks. We will not have worship on Sunday mornings. We will not have Sunday school. We will not have smaller group meetings either. We're trying to abide by the direction of the medical experts in our state and federal governments. We would sing. Music's an important part of worship gatherings. One song here at Bethlehem, Stonepile, and Springvale churches that we have been opening our service with is just called the Servant Song. I want to remind you of the first verse of that song, what it says. Brother, let me be your servant. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are in a time and situation where we may have to let someone else be a helper to us. I speak to you who may be alone, maybe some of our elderly members. I'll say more about this later, but you may need some help along the way. Someone to pick up a prescription or even some groceries. Don't be afraid to let someone help. It is important of what we do as a church to be here for one another. And another thing we do Sunday after Sunday, we greet one another, wish God's blessing on one another. It's a normal practice in these two congregations to shake hands, often give a hug. Well, we didn't do that last week in our service, and obviously today we can't offer a handshake or a hug to one another. We can still wish God's blessing on one another. I would like to suggest something to you. When I'm done, when this little service is over, go call someone from your congregation, just to check up on them. Let them know that you're thinking of them. Let them know that they're not alone through this whole thing. Sometimes we may feel alone, but we're not. So though we can't greet one another in person, I hope that when we're done, you will make that phone call or that text message to someone and let them know that they're on your mind. We would read Scripture. And I want to read one of the Scriptures that we would have been using today. This is from the 9th chapter of Matthew, beginning with the 27th verse. As Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith will it be done to you." And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, "See that no one knows about this." But they went out and spread the news about him all over that region. While they were going out, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. When the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said it is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." At these two congregations, Bethlehem, Stonepile-Springvale, we have been dealing through this Lenten season so far with the theme of having servant hearts. That's the centerpiece of our altar table to remind us of that. In the 10th chapter of Matthew, following obviously the 9th there, it says that Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. In all the towns and villages, Jesus performed a threefold ministry. He taught and he preached. Now, a lot of times Jesus taught with words. He did that in the synagogues of the towns he visited. He did that in people's homes. And he did that on the road. He taught, he preached, sometimes to very large gatherings, but also sometimes to maybe just the 12 who were traveling with him. But more importantly, I think he taught with his life. You see, some of the greatest teaching we do is with our lives, with our actions. It's particularly relevant at our time, such a time as this. How do we react to the changes in our lives? With panic? With depression? You see, those of us who are adults at least, people are watching us. Our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews, they watch us. And how we react to times such as this. I've used it often, but one of my favorite sayings is that attitudes are catching. And the attitude with which we deal with this present situation is important. We can do this. That's a message we're seeing over and over on TV, on the internet. We can do this. One post I saw on the internet, I guess it's true, but you can't believe everything on the internet, but it said, reminded us of Anne Frank. Anne Frank during the Jewish Holocaust. She and 6 other people spent 761 days in a 450-foot square foot attic. And they did it. We can do this. Teaching, preaching at its highest point is not to talk to people about Jesus Christ, but to show them Jesus Christ. Every Christian must be a teacher, and they must teach others what Christianity is, not by words, but by their actions. Jesus was a teacher and a preacher. Now, he was also a healer. Remind you of Matthew 9:16. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like a sheep without a shepherd. The feelings Jesus had for people. Let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, as Paul admonishes us. The Christian with a servant heart sees the pain of people, feels it with them. I have a favorite mental picture of Jesus at the grave of Lazarus. You remember that story. Lazarus has died, and his sisters, Mary and Martha, were in mourning. It is where we have that shortest verse of the Bible in the 11th chapter of John, where it says that Jesus wept. Well, in my mind, when I envision that, I see Jesus standing outside the grave of Lazarus, one arm around Mary, one arm around Martha, crying with them. Because he knew, he felt with them the pain that they were feeling. He knew their pain. I pray that we, with our servant hearts, may feel the pain of one another. That's how we get through this time. That's how we support one another. That's how we help with the healing process. In the 10th chapter of Matthew, Jesus sends out his 12 with some instruction. He was telling them to be in ministry. Last week I said to you that I am a clergy person, and as such, I am in the ministry. And you know what I mean by that. I am in the ministry. But as we understand what that means, I also want you to understand what it means when I say to you that you are in ministry. Maybe not in the ministry, but you are in ministry. Jesus did not call and send out his disciples to become rich or famous or comfortable. He called them to be in ministry. Remember the James Bond movies? When 007 had an assignment, he always first went to Q for some new gadget that it just so happened he was going to need in this new adventure that he was having. Something that would help him on his next mission. Well, Jesus did not send out his 12 with gadgets. He sent them out with authority. They didn't look like they had any authority at all. Certainly not in religious matters. You know, think about it. There was a tax collector. If you wanted to know something about your taxes, yes, you could ask him, but don't ask them about God. There was a religious zealot. In our modern terms, that would be a militant. Ask him about revolution against Rome, but don't ask him about being in right relationship with God. Or there were fishermen. Ask them about the best time to fish. Ask them about what kind of net to use or what kind of bait to use or the places to go for the best fishing, but not about how to offer people to God. But Jesus sent them out. The tax collector, the zealot, the fisherman, with authority and instruction. You know, one of the first things he said to them, begin where you are with people you know. That's where we are now. Travel is limited. The places you can or should go are limited. But your servant heart can still be in ministry. Your servant heart can still show that you are a disciple of Jesus Christ. Back in the 60s, there was a man named Malcolm Boyd. He was a militant kind of in his own way. But he wrote a prayer of discipleship, a book of prayers of discipleship. He was an Episcopalian priest. And he wrote a collection of prayers, or a book, just called, Are You Running With Me, Jesus? And one of those prayers was this. Send me, Lord, but where? To do what? To bring pardon where there had been injury in a life I casually brush against in my daily life? But I had thought of mediating a teenage gang war in Chicago. Send me to help turn doubt into faith in a person with whom I live intimately in my circle of family and friends. But I had thought of helping a tired old drunk on Skid Row. Send me to bring joy into a life consumed by sadness, which touches the hem of my life at a drinking fountain But I had thought only of a far-off mission field. Send me, Lord. Send me next door to the next room to speak somehow to a human heart beating alongside mine. Send me to bear a note of dignity into a subhuman, hopeless situation. Send me to show forth joy in a moment where there is otherwise no joy. Send me to reflect your light in the darkness of futility, mere resistance, and the horror of casual human cruelty. But give me your light too, Lord, in my own darkness and need. Yes, we are in scary, uncertain times. But the Lord will move through this time with us. We will make it. But for now, let your servant heart show through. Show kindness in the empty grocery stores, or at least the empty grocery store shelves. As you go there, as you have to, show concern to the people around you there. Oh yes, at a proper social distance, but you can still show concern to them. Reach out to people who are alone. If we would have been able to worship together today, we were closing our service with a hymn called Make Me a Blessing. I can't sing that song without thinking of a man in one of the churches I served named Boyd Powell. Boyd Powell always sat in about this second pew of the church and the church sanctuary, and this was his favorite hymn. On those occasions when we may say, what's your favorite hymn to sing today? Asking the congregation, Boyd would always pipe up and say, let's sing Make Me a Blessing. Boyd couldn't sing. He sang loud, but he couldn't sing. But I can still hear his voice in my mind singing this hymn because I know that Boyd lived it. He didn't just sing it, he lived it. May I remind you of the words of that hymn. Out in the highways and byways of life, many are weary and sad. Carry the sunshine where darkness is rife, making the sorrowing glad. Tell the sweet story of Christ and his love. Tell of his power to forgive. Others will trust him if only you prove true every moment you live. Give as 'twas given to you in your need. Love as the Master loved you. Be to the helper a helper indeed. Unto your mission be true. Make me a blessing. Make me a blessing. Out of my life may Jesus shine. Make me a blessing, O Savior, I pray. Make me a blessing to someone today. I want to close our moments together with a prayer I used last week in our worship. It's a printed prayer. I know some of you may not like them, but sometimes you find a good one. This was written by Cameron Bell. It's been on the internet a lot. Maybe you've seen it. But would you pray it with me? Father, may we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or paying their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who have no such option. May we who may have to cancel our trip remember those who have no safe place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market remember those who have no margin money to lose. May we who settle in for a quarantine at home remember those who have no home. Father, as fear grips our country, let us choose love during this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other. Let us find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbor. This is our prayer. Amen. Thank you for joining me. We'll do this again next Sunday, 10 o'clock, if you are able to join us. But for now, go make that phone call. Call someone who may need to hear a word of encouragement. And God's peace be with you.